Today what we're going to be doing is working on a Reg I tier list. This is going to be updated post NAIC for the VGC 2025 World Championships. And what I've actually done here is I went and I've broken down what it means to be in every single one of these tiers. And S tier Pokemon is something that is so meta defining that if you want to actually win events and compete at the highest level, your team should have at least one of these things. These are going to be the best Pokemon in the game. A tier is just things that are very solid. A team could have two A tier mons, but usually you're going to be pairing one of these A tier mons with your S tier mon to get the right combination to actually compete at the highest level. Things in the B tier are still good, but they usually need at least an S or A tier partner to actually be viable. Get it? Be viable. And then C tier is usable but one-dimensional. These are things that, like, you could make it work on ladder, you could make it work in close sheet, you might even be able to make it work at a tournament, but there's really only like one way to play it, and if people know the exact checks to those things and they don't let you do your gimmick or your thing, it's going to be a lot harder to make those Pokemon work, but they are usable in certain situations. D tier is just YouTube/meme content. We use a lot of this stuff on this channel. If you guys want to see some stuff like that, think about checking it out. I mean, we just got done using like Lugia Cosma M, so, you know, we make anything work. But definitely like low tier. And then the F tier is too deep, you know, like Cosma M. Like, it's a little bit too deep, but, you know, we're still gonna list them. What we're also doing today is going over all these Pokemon's like different base stats, all their different like good teammates and stuff like that. So if you guys like this tier list stuff, please think about letting me know. And we're streaming live on Twitch, even though no one's talking. So what we're gonna be doing is getting right onto this, and we're starting things off at the very beginning in Gen 1. Now, Mewtwo is a Pokemon that I've featured a lot on my YouTube channel. I took Mewtwo to NAIC. I have like the most championship points with Mewtwo out of like anyone in like the past like half a decade. Like, Mewtwo is a Pokemon that we're going to be talking a lot about. And I think in the past few tier lists, there's a sub right there. Appreciate the sub. Thank you for stopping by. Hopefully you're enjoying the Reg I tier list action today. Mewtwo is a Pokemon that gets a lot of options. Like, if we're trying to think where would Mewtwo go in this sort of tier list, it's not one-dimensional. It can do a little bit of everything. It's like the red mage of VGC, like, you know, jack of all trades, master of none. You can put it in the B tier, which is probably where we're gonna put it. But like, realistically, in the past like 2 or 3 tier lists, every single time I put Mewtwo just a little bit higher up than people normally would put it. And they say, oh, Mewtwo's F, it's so bad, it's so bad. Bro, I did better than Wolf, than Zang, than JoeUX9, all those people at NAIC using Mewtwo. You can definitely use this mon, but you need the right partner. And it's obviously outclassed by things like Shadow Rider. Yeah, unfortunately being a master of 1 or 2 is very strong. I mean, Mewtwo's one of those like really, really weird mons. Let's take a look at like Mewtwo realistically and talk about what it brings to the table before we actually place where we're going to place it. So Mewtwo it's basically just like completely power crept by things like Shadow Rider. And so that doesn't mean that Shadow Rider's S and Mewtwo is F. No, that means like Shadow Rider's probably going to be like really, really high, and Mewtwo's just a little bit worse than that. So Mewtwo's also a respectable Pokemon. One sub every time I hear Mewtwo called the Red Mage of Restricted Mons. It's true, like, they should make Mewtwo shiny a Red Mage. It gets 2 good abilities, Pressure and Unnerve. One cool thing that Mewtwo gets compared to, like, other Restricteds is access to, like, Life Dew. There's not that many Restricteds that get this move. Shadow Rider is one of them. But if you're ever playing a team that has, like, Psych Up strats involved, like, Mewtwo's actually a really good mon. It gets access to, like, Psy Strike. Very, very good thing that's, like, a super Psy Shock. Targets the defense stat instead. Too bad Calgary gets Unnerve for free and Moxie and Life. Yeah, it's literally just like a completely power crept Shadow Rider, right? Shadow Rider's 150, 165, Mewtwo's 154, 130. But that being said, Mewtwo does get access to like a lot of tools Shadow Rider doesn't get. It gets a lot better coverage on its special moves. It gets access to like Blizzard, Ice Beams, Flamethrowers. It gets just different coverage. It gets access to like Icy Wind for some speed control. So like Mewtwo gets stuff. It gets like Recover, you know, it gets Taunt, obviously things like Shadow Rider would get, Weather Ball, Will-O-Wisp. So like it gets really cool tech options. And again, that doesn't make it like garbage. A Pokemon with all that tech, good enough bulk base stats can't be garbage. And again, the literal reason why it's in the B tier versus the C tier is because C tier things are one-dimensional. Mewtwo is anything but one-dimensional. So we're going to put it in the B tier for now. And I'm going to be doing my absolute best to rank these Pokemon in their tiers. Mewtwo will probably be near the bottom of the B tier. But I do think it's definitely a usable option in Reg I. You definitely would have to pair it with something like really good or really, really specific for a matchup to be viable, though. So let's take a look at Lugia. Lugia is a Pokemon that's pretty hard to use. We just got done using it, the other day on YouTube as well. Lugia is one of my favorites as well. Its best ability is obviously going to be this multi-scale here. What sets Lugia apart from a lot of the other restricteds in this list actually is the fact that it gets a 110 base speed. Not that many restricteds get like a fast. They're not that fast, right? So if we just plug in this, you see they're all like, other than like Shadow Rider or like Eternatus or Mewtwo or things that are fast, most of them are 90 or 95. You say, wish Lugia got TR. Nah, I don't think it needs TR. I think Lugia, the thing that it gets realistically is people like to run it with like Calm Mind. They like to run it with like Aeroblast, right? Aeroblast right here. They like to run it with like Earth Power. And then, I think like a lot of people like to play it with like a Covert Cloak. And then sometimes they put like a recovery move here. Sometimes they put like Protect here. So like this is how like most people tend to play Lugia, with like a Cloak or like a Leftovers here. And they realistically just kind of wait things out. The problem with Lugia is like the Pokemon there at the very top of the S tier, things we're getting ahead of ourselves saying things like Miraidon, Shadow Rider, stuff like that. They really check the Lugia. They really force its Terra into something like a Fairy Terra. And so Lugia is a really good example of like, if this is your set and you need to put like enough speed to outspeed base 100s and you still need to have enough special attack to actually KO things, you're stuck in like a sweeper set realistically. And you just are lining up to get checked by Kali I, Miraidon, Shadow Rider. So, like, this is where I would put something like Lugia in the C tier. You see how, like, this is a really good, it's usable. You definitely can use it, but it's one-dimensional. Like, it gets access to Psych Up, but it can only really do the, I'm going to call mine like 5 times and then like try an outvalue game. There's not that much else it can do. It could potentially be seen as like an off Tailwind setter, but there are things like Ho-Oh, other, just general Tailwind setters that are better. And so I would say Lugia is just a good example of like a one-dimensional Pokemon. Taking a look at Ho-Oh though, Ho-Oh is a Pokemon that's actually a lot better nowadays. I was taking a look at like a couple of my old tier lists and a couple of like other creators' old tier lists, and none of them really had like Ho-Oh that high. And then like Pokeaim top cut Milwaukee with Ho-Oh, and then like people started to respect Ho-Oh Miraidon. And it's funny, I want to talk about this. Ho-Oh, like, being on all those teams isn't actually a sign of Ho-Oh being that good. It's good players using Miraidon correctly that makes those teams that good. You let Miraidon leverage that advantage, force the mons that people need to be able to bring to check the Ho-Oh, and then, yeah, Ho-Oh can work, but you're basically just like, fish in a barrel with Miraidon, and using Ho-Oh as bait. Dangling Ho-Oh as the bait here. I think even Pokeaim said that in one of their interviews, right? So, yeah, I think Ho-Oh is definitely usable, though. I've been using a lot of Ho-Oh on YouTube recently, too. It gets access to things like Sacred Fire. It gets Regenerator as a good ability. Like, it gets Tailwind. It's a really, really good manual Tailwind setter. When we talk about manual Tailwind setters, what that means is Tailwind setters that aren't boosted by, like, Prankster or any other abilities that help them use this, like a Gale Wings or something like that. Also, like, this just hit me. Like, almost any ability, like, Gale Wings Ho-Oh, like, Super Talonflame would slap. That'd actually be really good. But yeah, Sacred Fire is the way you want to play Ho-Oh. 50% chance to burn. That'd be kind of nice. People still like to run it with Brave Bird. People like to run it, like, sometimes they run it like Cloak. Amulet Ho-Oh is still really, really popular. And then they sometimes just put, like, Protect up there. So, like, very, very standard looking Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh forces you to play a certain way, which is good for a mon like Miraidon, which just wants to sit there and click buttons. Yeah, and it covers for Miraidon's weaknesses very well. Miraidon's weak against, like, ground, fairy. Ho-Oh resists those. It's super effective against anything when you use ice moves that are also good against Miraidon as well. So I think Ho-Oh is a really, really usable mon. That being said, like, where would we put it? I think it would definitely go in the B tier for now. I think I might move things around. It might be able to jump into the A tier if there is enough room, because it's one of those mons that you could actually pair with, like, almost anything and be good. But Ho-Oh is one of those, like, support restricteds that definitely needs, like, the right teammate to be good. That's why I think it's a good example of putting in the B tier. Like, the Miraidon really helps balance it out. Like, if I were to put Ho-Oh and Lugia together, do you see how that, like, doesn't work at all? You're way too reactive. You're way too passive. You need, like, a good aggressive restricted to pair with Ho-Oh, and, you're just not going to find that in the lower tiers. So let's talk about some good restricteds. We're going to talk about Kyogre here, and Kyogre won, was it Portland Regionals by Gavin Michaels? So Kyogre is definitely, like, a usable mon. I definitely think it's really, really underrated. Kyogre goes through, like, phases where, like, the ladder is just full of Kyogres, and then like it goes through phases where like no one's really using Kyogre, and I think it's really good. It gets 90 base speed like every other like base old restricted like Gen 3 and Gen 4 restricted, but it gets Drizzle. It's going to set the rain. When you're playing this in close sheet, I think Kyogre is probably... There are arguments to be made for saying Kyogre is the best restricted in close sheet if you're just playing on ranked, because they don't know if you're Scarfed, they don't know if you're Specs, they don't know if you're Mystic Water, they don't know anything about your set, they don't know what your Terra is. Kyogre is one of the better abusers of Terra in this format, because if you go for a fake out with like an Incin into a Kyogre and they Ghost Terra spout you in close sheet, you lose. If you go for like an Electro Drift on the Kyogre and they go like Grass Terra or Ground Terra and they block it and they spout you, you lose. If you eat the spout without trading correctly against Kyogre, you lose. That's true in closed sheet. That's true in open sheet. The fact that it also gets access to like Water Spout and things like Origin Pulse, which is like a less accurate, slightly weaker spout, it's really good. It gets access to like Thunder, it gets access to Ice Beam, it gets access to really good coverage. It has really good bulk for the format too, having a good Spadef stat. But this thing is really good into both of the riders, which makes it actually like very usable. So I think Kyogre is like really good. Would I put Kyogre in the S tier though? No, I don't. I think Kyogre in any other VGC format has been like easy S tier, one of the best mons in the game. But with what they've done through Scarlet and Violet, a lot of the mons they've come out with, a lot of the Paradox Pokemon, a lot of the Ruin Pokemon, things like Miraidon, those are all like kind of soft checks to Kyogre's playstyle. Also, Zamazenta gets that big Wide Guard. Wide Guard is really big in this meta right now. So I think somewhere where I would put Kyogre is just the A tier. I think Kyogre is just a good A tier mon. It's definitely near the top of the A tier. Maybe as we get further on into the list, I might be able to expand it into the bottom of S. But I think right now Kyogre is like a very solid mon that it creates a win now option that your opponent always has to be respecting. And if they don't have the right tools for the matchup, they have one sloppy turn, Kyogre folds the game in half and you win right there. Great example of an A tier mon. Taking a look at the other Gen 3 restricted, going to be Groudon here. So I think the number one thing to do when you compare Groudon is compare Groudon to something like a Koraidon, because they both get that Sun Drought-esque ability. So Koraidon's going to be right here. So the differences between these guys is Koraidon gets a 135, 135. You say Kyogre has just been spam water moves till you or I die for 20 years, and that's a-okay. Yeah, it's true. So if we compare these, Koraidon is weaker than Groudon, but it's way faster than Groudon. And Koraidon's ability is like a super drought. You basically get to set the sun, and then you get like an attack boost on top of it. Koraidon also has better coverage than Groudon. The reason why you might want to run Groudon instead is access to AoE options like Precipice Blades. Ground typing is usually actually just a little bit better than something like a Dragon fighting typing, being 4 times weak to Fairy. So you could say, is Groudon better than Koraidon? It sounds like you're setting Groudon up to be really good. I think Groudon's just different. The fact that this is not 100% accuracy means it's kind of like a slot machine to where like you could be the best player in the world. You could literally be the best player in the world with the best team. And if you miss like one of your P-Blades, the game's over in like 2 turns, right? That's hard. That means like we're talking about this again, the list updated for Worlds. I think Groudon's very good, but it's hard to use. I ran Groudon because it's a great Miraidon check without wasting Terra. Yeah, I feel like if you have that big of a Miraidon weakness, it can be very good. It just means Groudon is good into Koraidon, not necessarily everything else. It's true, yeah. Koraidon is much more offensive, but Groudon's fits on Sun balance better. I still think Koraidon is much better. I think Groudon is definitely usable, right? I think Groudon is usable. There's another sub here. Yo, thank you so much. Can't wait for my first ever Worlds event. Hope to see you there. Yeah, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be at Worlds. Worlds has been there before. It's a good center for it in Anaheim, so hope to see you there. Good luck if you're competing, and I think we would put Groudon in the B tier. But I don't think it's as good as Ho-Oh. Again, Groudon, you're seeing patterns here. B tier means these things are definitely good. You can totally use these, but you got to have the right teammate. You really got to have the right teammate. If I were to pair Groudon and Lugia, that team is now too reactive. We don't have enough, like, offensive pressure to bully, right? So, like, Groudon, just a B tier mon. The fact that if Precipice Blades was 100% accuracy, like, we put this up here, easy. But it's not, right? And so you have to knock it down just a little bit. Memes and Dreams is, like, I think one of the higher placing Groudons at NAIC. Where do you think Groudon would go? I don't think Groudon's A tier. Because even in matchups where Groudon is, like, amazing, and it's like, whoa, this is like so good in this matchup, it just gets doubled into every single turn, which means you have to run like Protect, and if you're running like an AV set, if you get knocked under half on your Groudon, it makes so you like can't pivot incorrectly. It's just, Groudon feels really chunky with how like aggressive the top end of the meta is. I think Groudon, similar to Kyogre, is another mon that's a lot better on ladder. Even like open sheet ladder, any ladder, like it's one of those mons that's easier to play on ladder than it is in like actual like high level tournaments. I think it's usable. It's just that like I feel Groudon also like kind of falls prey to some of like the problems that like Kyogre has, in which like you want to be using Precipice Blades and like everyone's teching Wide Guard to stop the Riders, and so like Groudon still has a hard matchup there. It just doesn't have the stats to keep up with the Gen 8, 9 guys. Yep, I think Groudon's a good example. It's been power crept at this point, but it is still usable. It is still usable. So let's take a look at the next one. The last Gen 3 restricted is going to be Rayquaza, right? So Rayquaza is a cool mon, but I'm not a big fan of it. So Rayquaza, I fought one of these at NEIC. It gets Airlock, which disables all the different weathers. I tend to build this guy Sash when I usually use him. So like Sash is generally what I like to do when I play Rayquaza, but it gets a 95 base speed, which means it's faster than things like Groudon, Kyogre, you know, Palkia, Dialga, things like that. 150 means, which means it can be a physical or special mons, but it gets a Dragon's Ascent, like a 120 base power, basically flying close combat. Very, very cool mon, but it's really aggressive. And if you're gonna be using like a focus sash on your restricted, that restricted needs to be cracked. Something like a Shadow Rider, literal pay to win mon, right? I feel like Rayquaza's not there. Like a lot of the things you could do with Rayquaza, you could realistically do with like a multi-scale, like a Dragonite. Like a big banded like E-speed mon. That's not your boy. 4 times weakness to Fairy with like a big like Adamant extreme speed, that's Dragonite, right? So I feel like Rayquaza is one of those mons that is really one-dimensional. I would say it's probably in the C tier. Would be cool if they went back and fixed older restricteds to help power creep or nerf some of the new ones. No, I don't think that would... That's not how Pokemon works, right? This isn't like League of Legends. There's no balance patches. What they do is they give different mons different moves that suit different metas, and then when they create like other Pokemon, so instead of them like changing Rayquaza, what they'll do is they'll create like a really, really like busted new mon that Rayquaza checks to keep the triangle in check, right? So like they'll create a new mon that checks something that like pins Ray and unlocks Ray's ability to be good. That's what they'll do. They'll create new mechanics and stuff like that. They created like half the Ultra Beast to check Xerneas. Yeah, they did. That's the thing, is they'll just create new mons that do things like that. But I would put Ray in the C tier, but it's definitely better than Lugia. I don't think it's like YouTube meme content, because you can pair Ray with like a bunch of other restricteds to get like specific good matchups into other weather. But like if you're looking for like a 4 times weak Icemon and Fairy weakness that like can disable weather, like that's not your Rayquaza, that's an Altaria, right? So you can build like you can throw a Rayquaza, an Altaria, or a Dragonite onto any team and really get that same result. You just usually don't want to waste your restricted slot on that. They did do primals mostly, they just add new monsters, right? That's kind of how it works. So yeah, Rayquaza is in the C tier, I would say. Let's take a look. We're going into Gen 4 now. We're going to take a look at Palkia Origin first. And well, I mean, we might as well just do both, because we can take a look at both here. But Palkia is one of my favorite restricteds right now. I've been using a lot of Palkia Origin recently. I think it's really cool. So the difference between Palkia and Palkia Origin, you can see, is regular Palkia loses like 20 base attack, and it gets 20 more speed. I really, really like Palkia Origin. It's one of the only restricteds in this like 120 base speed tier, being able to outspeed things like Whimsicott and Roaring Moon and stuff like that. So it's really, really cool. It gets all the same moves Palkia gets. Palkia obviously gets access to things like Trick Room. You have to use Hydro Pump. It doesn't get things like Skull, but its signature move is Spatial Rend. High crit, basically it's a Dragon type Aeroblast. Very, very cool mon. I think this guy's definitely like usable. Regular Palkia tends to be built more on like Trick Room teams. I know like Topo streams a bunch with like big Trick Room Palkia. I think it's one of my favorite mons. Using just like a Leftovers, or maybe even something like a Psychic Seeds is probably one of my favorite way to play this, with like an Indity partner. Very, very good like Trick Room mon. You can use it to flip Trick Room backs. Water Dragon typing is like absolutely amazing. Very, very cool mon, right? Origin form Palkia are going to be a little bit aggressive. You tend to play like a very similar moveset with like the Spatial Rend and the Hydro Pumps, but now you're trying to go fast and just like bully things. So I really do like Origin form Palkia. It's honestly probably true though that regular Palkia is better, because you still get to hold an item. This item does stuff. It can't be knocked off, and it gives you a 1.2 boost, so it means you actually hit a lot harder with your Hydro Pumps and your Spatial Rends, but the Trick Room variant on Palkia is a little bit better. Did Palkia get Scald before the nerf, or is it always had to use Hydro? Palkia's always had to use Hydro. So yeah, I really think that like regular Palkia is better because you can hold like a seeds and you can kind of choose where you can hold citrus berry, you can hold AV. I've gotten points with AV Palkia in the past. Very, very good mon. I would say that like this is gonna sound so bad, but like I would definitely put like Palkia here in the C tier. I don't think it's good enough to be B tier. I don't. If it I feel like even if you put it in the B tier, I don't think that it should be there. It might be better than Ray though. Palkia is definitely better than Ray. Let me know if you guys agree with this. I don't think Palkia is a B tier mon. And then like Origin Palkia, like right there. Yeah, because like Palkia Origin can only really do that much. Now it can't get Scald. What if they go back and rework some of the lower power crept mons, saying they have to be on par with Koraidon and Miraidon? No, you can't. Like, there's no reason to do that. Pokemon's not that type of game. Because if you change spreads like that, people that come back after the long breaks and see their mons are all different, they're not going to know what's different, where you have to keep, like, base stats roughly the same. There's very minimal changes people can make to base stats. Or TPCI can make to base stats without, like, completely breaking how, like, people interact with the game. So it sucks, but you can't really. Like, Pokemon wants to be able to, like, if you learn something, you learned it and keep the information the same. They very rarely change base stats. Unless, like, it's, like, completely bricking, like, some other... I think they changed some of, like, Alakazam's base stats. And they tune some Pokemon, like Cresselia, that are a little bit, like, overtuned. But they don't really change base stats all that often. They give just different moves and different coverage. A lot of the times, if, like, a Pokemon's too busted, instead of, like, changing its base stats, they'll just take away moves from it. They'll just be like, you don't get this anymore, bro. Like, no longer a problem. And when they do changes like in Gen 7, I think they announce like, this is the changes, and it's like everyone kind of knows about it. But yeah, let me think. Do you think Palkia should be in the B tier? It's kind of hard to say because like it definitely fits with it needs a good A tier, S tier partner. Like Palkia Cali I is, I would believe, an exception to the rule that would put it in B tier. Like that's Palkia kind of leeching off the fact that it's such a good Cali I partner for the pivots and the switch-ins and stuff like that, that makes Palkia Cali I like a usable team. But I think that's like an exception to the rule, because you can't pair Palkia with like Miraidon and just make it good. I like literally like I made this team yesterday or whatever, and it's usable, but it's not good, right? You can't just give it a really good teammate and then it's good. Yeah, it's like C+. Yeah, I would agree. It's up there. They're both up there. You think base form's higher, but Origin looks right. Yeah, I think that's true. So we're going to leave that there. We're going to take a look at Dialga and Dialga Origin next. So they're similar to Palkia, and I actually think Dialga Origin is better than regular Dialga. So we're going to take a look at Dialga here and Dialga Origin. So taking a look at these guys here. So really, really good stat line. The difference here is, again, 20 base attack off of a useless stat, even though we've built physical Dialga. Where was that video? Where was the physical Dialga video? Where was that? I built it. It got it right there. Like Electric Seeds, bulk up, body press, physical Dialga. I've used a few. It's 120 base attack on regular Dialga. Like that's not even bad. That's like stronger than Flygon. But you get 120 Spadef. You get that 20 boost to your Spadef. And again, the Dialga form has to hold the Adamant Crystal, which gives your things like Flash Cannon and your Dracos and things like that. An extra 1.2 boost. Its signature move is Roar of Time, which is not that great. It's basically a Dragon-type Hyper Beam, so you tend to just run like Dragon Pulse or Draco on this thing. It's very similar to Palkia in that it gets like Trick Room. Sometimes people put like Earth Power. Sometimes people put like Flamethrower. Honestly, you kind of just go Protect on this thing. Now, I think Dialga is actually a very usable mon. I think it's actually a very, very usable mon. Dialga Origin, at least. Dialga Regular, it can hold like a Citrus, it can hold a Lefties, it can hold like an AV if you want to build sets like that. But I think that like this is a good example of something that's been power crept versus like this one. Once you get that Trick Room, it actually allows you to start sweeping with like the big Flash Cannon. Dragon Pulse is boosted by the Adamant Crystal. It can't be knocked off. I like Dialga Origin more. So I would probably put Dialga Origin up here. I think it's better than Mewtwo, but it's not better than Groudon. And then I would put regular Dialga probably here. And the reason why I would put it above Palkia Origin is because I think just Trick Room as a mechanic and holding like a Cloak Dialga next to like a Redirection teammate, that's Trick Room every single time. Like, they can't stop it. They're not one-shotting that. You can't, like, and that would allow you to have like good teammates. You could even sweep with Torkoal from there. The issue with Dialga, why it's not like in the B tier, A tier, is like things like Zenta and both the riders give it a lot of problems. Yeah, I think like I definitely think this is a good place to put it. Like the Adamant Orb or the Adamant Crystal really like puts a lot of value on Dialga in this format, and like Dialga could be paired with like even an A tier mon. And actually see play. Like Kyogre Dialga is very good. Miraidon Dialga can be usable in some situations. So like I think that I'm talking about Dialga, right? Not Palkia, but yeah, I think that Dialga is definitely like usable. At least in the Adamant Crystal version. Let me know if you guys agree with that or disagree with that. But I definitely think that Dialga is good. You're gonna also start to see a trend, right? Where we're starting near Gen 1 and going up. We're in Gen 4 right now. But you're starting to see a lot of the older mons are down here in this area, and we're gonna start to get more and more like A tier and S tier mons as like the formats like evolve and go forward. What would you pair with it to make it usable? So like yeah, Dialga's usually been paired with things like Kyogre in the past. I think Dialga Kyogre is really good because you're setting up the Trick Room for Kyogre to sweep. You can go Dialga Kali I. It's usually better on like these Trick Room teams. And one of the really cool things about Dialga is its access to like telepathy, right? It's really, really good. So like Dialga with something like an Ursaluna, it's one of like the best, it might be even the best restricted to pair with Ursaluna, because you can just slam those EQs. So like you're starting to see Dialga like unlocks like another different way to play those mons. Is that 5 subs from Morris? Yo, the Dialga, Kyogre master in chat right now. Holy moly. Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hopefully you're having a great day. I definitely think like Dialga and Ursaluna and things like that are very good, but I just want to say I appreciate it so much. Wouldn't a non-restricted be better Trick Room Center though, rather than using a restricted for that? Well, that's the thing. Dialga has a really, really unique typing to where like it makes it perfect. You would also use other non-restricteds, things like Cresselia's, Entity, stuff like that. But Dialga actually is one of the few mons that can like set that TR and start sweeping, right? Similar to Kali I, it's just like a single target mon, and it can have a good matchup in Kali I if you need to. But love that combo. Thank you so much for the subs. I appreciate it. Happy to have you here as always. And yeah, I really do think like Dialga is definitely like usable in that regard, to where it warrants being in the B tier because it can just like win games by itself. Pair it with screens and go to town. That's how it works, right? Dialga Grim, that's Trick Room. Bring out the right teammate, parting shot out your Grim, go to town. Trick Room on a restricted means you don't have to reposition after setting TR. Yeah, especially if you can utilize the Trick Room on that restricted. Like, it's so good. You have such an interesting take on every mon. It's refreshing. Someone has to do it, right? So let's take a look at Giratina and Giratina Origin next. So those are two mons that I also really think are very, very different based off of, their item, the Origin form versus the regular. So we got two different Giratinas here. The tale of two Giratinas. If you remember correctly, I actually said that I expected there to be like 1 or 2 Giratinas in Day 2 in AIC. I think it's one of the best mons to actually utilize like Terra as a mechanic, because it has Levitate, which means when you go Fire Terra, you don't have to worry about that ground weakness. Like you gain a fairy resistance, you're unwispable. Very, very good mon. The difference between these two is going to be they both get like that humongous base 150 base HP, but Giratina Origin just takes 20 out of each of the defense stats and puts it in offense instead. So if you want offense, you go Giratina Origin. If you want defense with like the ability to hold a defensive item, something like a citrus berry, a leftovers, anything you would really want, that's where you would use this one. They both get like really good defensive abilities too. Pressure Solve, this is probably the best pressure staller in the game, this or Eternatus. And then it gets telepathy too. You can pair with a lot of stuff. The difference between Giratina and things like Palkia and Dialga is it does not get Trick Room, right? If Giratina got Trick Room, this Pokemon would be like almost S tier because you can't break it. You're not one-shotting Giratina. It will just eat the Astral, right? It will eat the Glacial Lance. It's that fat, right? So Giratina is a lot harder to make work, and base form Giratina needs a lot of babysitting because it doesn't get the tech options. It doesn't get the speed control. It doesn't really do a lot. It kind of just sits there. Origin form Giratina does get good setup moves. It gets things like Calm Mind. You can build it physical or special. The Grisius core here, again, makes it not knockoffable, so you actually take that, reduced damage from knockoff, and then you can build it with like Shadow Sneak, Poltergeist. You can even go a special set with like Calm Mind, Earth Power, Draco, Shadow Ball. Very, very good. This Pokemon is actually really usable. Like Giratina in itself just checks Shadow Rider Zenta. And let me know if you guys want to see a tier list for all of like other cores, Because, like, I feel like we could make a tier list ranking different, like, 2-mon cores, like, different restricted cores, like Shadow Rider Zenta, like Miraidon Kali I. I feel like we could make a video like that. That might be a lot of fun to do. But if we're taking a look at these, I definitely think Giratina Origin is better because it can be a little bit more aggressive. It really gets that 1.2 boost on its stabs, getting access to things like Poltergeist. This is what we were talking about. Instead of changing base stats, you give Mons moves that they didn't even need. Like, for example, like Giratina gets Poltergeist, Dragapult doesn't. That's a really good example of like changing things and tweaking things in between gens without necessarily making one mon busted. Instead of nerfing Pult's base stats or buffing Giratina, they just change what mons get different moves. So the Giratina Origin can be a very, very usable mon, but it's a Terra Hog. And regular base form Giratina is also a Terra Hog, but it's just not that great. So like I would put base form Giratina in the YouTube meme content. It's not too deep. You can make it work, but it's just memes for base form Giratina in my opinion. AV is probably one of my favorite sets. It actually got nerfed in previous gens, losing double team, because what you used to do is just make it a pressure staller with like leftovers and go like double team Shadow Force and do stuff like that. But Origin Giratina, I actually think is usable. The problem with it is one-dimensional. I would love to put it in the B tier, but I don't think I can. It's not as good as Palkia. Is it better than Ray? I think that it is better than Ray, but I don't know if it's better than Dialga. That's a weird mix-up. But I do think Ray's better than Dialga. That's a weird triangle that goes on there. I think that it's probably in between these two. That's fair. It's such a hard mon to use, and it doesn't get access to any recovery moves, so it has to have the right teammates. I would put it in the middle of C tier. I think that's a good spot for it. That's fair. It's very unique typing, and it has some really good matchups. It's good into things like Kyogre. It's good into a lot of the S tier mons, but the problem is it falls prey to like non-S tier partners. So like Fluttermane gives it a lot of problems. Shenpao gives it a lot of problems. Chi-Yu gives it a crap ton of problems, basically unwinnable. And so the support mons that are popular near the top of the ladder really make Giratina's life a lot harder than it needs to be. Thank you for the follow as well. Taking a look at Reshiram and Zekrom next. Reshiram is actually my favorite, like, restricted Pokemon. So Reshiram, I should use more Reshiram. It's my favorite restricted. I also really like Zekrom a lot. But yeah, Reshiram is sick. Really, really like Reshiram. It gets that base 90 speed that a lot of these other base restricteds get. So it's really cool. It gets a 150 base special attack. Reshiram is like super slept on. Dragon Fire typing is very good. It gets multiple signature moves, things like Blue Flare, having a 20% chance to burn, 130 base power, really, really strong. It's basically like a super Fire Blast, right? And then it gets access to Fusion Flare, which if you're comparing it with like, if you're using it with Fusion Bolt on the same team at the same time, basically it will double in power if Fusion Bolt was used previously. And it's a weird mechanic to where, like, let's say Zekrom goes first, like using like a Scarf Zekrom, and you use Fusion Bolt, and then like another Pokemon moves, and then Reshiram moves. It won't get the boost. It has to be right after Fusion Bolt. AV Reshiram is actually like a really, really good set. I think it's very, very solid. This Pokemon's chunky, and you can get the same result by pairing it with like Intimidate on the physical side, screens, things like that. Like, I think Reshiram is definitely a usable mon that people haven't really like hit the skill ceiling of, but at the same time, it is slightly power crept. A lot of the good S tier mons, things like Kali Shadow Rider, Kali I with Terra, Miraidon, things that are going to be up there give Reshiram a hard time. I think Terra as a mechanic also kind of gives Reshiram a hard time. Reshiram in previous gens, its biggest boost was the fact that like it had a really unique defensive typing, so it could slot in as a good teammate for things like Kali I, and it could slot in as like a really unique defensive pivot. And then when it pinned those things after slotting as a defensive pivot, like they were pinned, like you had the good check on them. And now people just Terra away, right? They're just like, oh, Reshiram, cool. Like you hit me with Fire Attack. I'm Water Terra. I'm always Water Terra. Everything's Water Terra, right? So like that's one of the issues with Reshiram. But that being said, I think Reshiram is usable, but you're starting to see a pattern. It gets access to Tailwind, but it doesn't really do that much else. It can only really be used as a good defensive pivot with a repin potential. So I think that it's one-dimensional, right? But where would I put it? I think that it's better than Giratina. I think it's better than Ray, but I don't think it's better than Palkia. I think it goes in the C tier. I'd love to put Reshiram higher. Like I said, it's my favorite restricted. But even if you want to go really deep and find cool ways to use it, a good teammate won't save it. right? Pairing it with a Shadow Rider doesn't just make it work. Pairing it with a Miraidon, that's too many ground and dragon weaknesses. It doesn't like work. It doesn't gel with a lot of the top restricteds, so that's why it's in the C tier, I think. I love the Mon, but there's not really that many ways to use it. You can put like a Psy Seeds on it. You can get creative with like an eject pack set with like Overheat and Draco. It's one of the only mons that can really do that. There's only a couple mons that can have like multiple moves with like stat drops to get you a free pivot, but that's just cheese at the end of the day. And then if you're doing that, you don't have any damage modification. You don't have that good defensive item. It just makes the mon like really hard to use. Taking a look at Zekrom though. Oh man, Zekrom is way harder to use than Reshiram, but I like Zekrom. Zekrom is having a rough time in this format. In the Dynamax format, I think Zekrom was a lot more usable because like Zekrom could be using the max moves and stacking like, you know, the max quakes to get like Spadef boost and other things like that. Zekrom was good. It got Rising Voltage in previous gens, but it lost. It doesn't get Rising Voltage anymore. So like special Zekrom just doesn't work anymore. So you're going to be using like this 150 base attack stat, which means honestly Zekrom loses to an Intimidate. If they have an Incineroar, which is one of the most popular Pokemon in the format, Zekrom is a wet noodle. And the biggest problem Zekrom has is it shares the exact same defensive typing as Miraidon, right? It's the exact same defensive typing as Miraidon. So everyone coming to check Miraidon with all of their ground moves and their ice moves and their fairy coverage, Zekrom is a Miraidon without the 135 base speed, good ability, and immunity to Intimidate. So Zekrom has like the biggest chip on its shoulder to get anything done. And all it gets to use is things like Fusion Bolt and Bolt Strike, which is not even 100% accurate. It's like a, you know, same thing Reshiram version on its physical side. I think Zekrom's cool. I think it gets Tailwind. It gets access to like Scale Shot and things like that if you want to run like a loaded dice set. It did get access to Dragon Dance recently, I think maybe over the past gen. Zekrom has tools, but there's no reason to run one of these things. And if you're really like, well, I don't want to use Miraidon, but I really like that defensive typing. You know what you could use instead? You could just use a Raging Bolt, right? Same thing, electric dragon typing, but not costing your restricted slots, similar to like Rayquaza and Dragonite and stuff like that. So where does Zekrom fall? I'm sorry, buddy. I'm so sorry. You're a meme content. It's not too deep. Like, I use Zekrom a lot for YouTube videos. It always does well, and we find really fun and creative ways to use it. Scarf Zekrom's fun, AV Zekrom's fun. We're using it with like Fly, but it's not really like viable. If I was going to Worlds this year to compete, remember I'm going just as a content creator, I would use Zekrom this year. This year I would have busted out the big Zek. Because there's like two things it can do. If you have like the right teammates, like we have a video coming out this week where we're going to pair Zekrom with like Smeargle with like Fusion Flare and stuff like that to try and get some value. Being able to use like the double damage Fusion Flare and stuff like that, but those are just memes. That's stuff for YouTube. I wish Zekrom was better. But it's always hard to use Zekrom, but it tries its best. We're going to take a look at Kyurem White. Kyurem White and Kyurem Black. Kyurem White's a really weird mon to where I actually think Kyurem White, take a look at both these guys here. You can see their base stats. Kyurem Black gets the 170 base attack versus Kyurem White gets the 170 base special attack. I think, if I'm recalling correctly, that it is the highest base special attack in the game at 170, stronger than Shadow Rider, right? And I actually think Kyurem has like the best stats out of every single Pokemon in the game. 125 HP is massive. 90-100 is amazing bulk stats. 95 base speed makes it faster than things like Kyogre, Groudon, Reshiram, Zekrom, Palkia, Dialga. 170, strongest special attack in the game. Yeah, we have like a 120 here, but remember, Kyurem also has more base stats than like most mons. The only other mons that have the same base stat total are Terrapico, Zacian, and Zenta. I think if we're just looking at pure base stats, Kyurem has the best base stat allocation of like almost any other mon. Zacian might be the only other one, Zacian and Zenta, but it's huge. Like, all its stats are in the right spot, and then it gets access to Reshiram's signature move in Fusion Flare. It does not get access to Blue Flare, but then it also gets like Freeze Dry. It gets Blizzard. Now, this thing takes like the right team. You got to pair it with the right team, but it's very good. I'm going to call it Koraidon and Kyurem. I'm going to mix those names up all the time. They both start with K, but it's a skill check. Your opponent has to have the right mon, the right team, and it also just slots into checking a lot of the high-level stuff. Things like Miraidon, you can check that with Kyurem. Kyurem is a big skill check. Your opponent has to have the right stuff, And if they just try and trade, Kyurem will always win the trade. It's definitely in the B tier. It's not in the A tier because it can't just work by itself. It needs like the right teammates to really be usable. But it's definitely in the B tier. I think that it's probably better than Dialga, but it's not as good as Groudon. I think Groudon's still like a little bit more usable by itself, but it's in the B tier. I think it's really good with Shadow Rider. I think it's really good with a bunch of other good mons, and it doesn't fall prey to the same weaknesses that things like Giratina or other mons in the lower tiers fall prey to. Like, yeah, like Fluttermane's good into it, but you can't OHKO it, right? Like Specs Flutter Fairy Terra might be able to Moonblast KO Kyurem, but like AV Kyurem just says like, you're not one-shotting me, and I'm trading 1 for 1, and I'm threatening to trade 1 for 2, right? Very, very solid mon. I think it's really, really good. And if we were to take a look at Kyurem B, I think Kyurem B is also a very good mon. It's actually been the beneficiary of buffs over previous gens. It gets access to Scale Shot, which is a relatively newer move, which you can pair with like a loaded dice, right? This set right here, Icicle Spear, like it didn't used to get these options really. Like the loaded dice coming out, Scale Shot coming out, makes this Pokemon really usable. And it gets Dragon Dance, which it didn't used to be able to get. Like this Pokemon, instead of changing base stats, they've given it different moves to be usable. It's a really one-dimensional way to play it, but like it's usable. 170, 95 with like that set, like. So again, we're comparing, you know how we compared Rayquaza to Dragonite, and we compared Zekrom to Raging Bolt. You can compare a Kyurem Black to a Baxcalibur, and they basically do, they're the same set. Kyurem's just a little bit better, right? So it's usable, right? Kyurem Black used to be OU because its best ice attack was Ice Beam. I know, right? It used to just use Freeze Dry on ice. And you can also, if you wanted to run something stupid, you can run like, where is it? It gets Fusion Bolt with the Zekrom special attack. Its signature move, which is the physical electric attack. What's the move that it gets? It was so dumb. What's that big ice move? Freeze Shock. Big Freeze Shock, and you just throw like a Power Herb on it, you know? Just to chuck a Freeze Shock out of things, right? Like that's fun. Physical, like 140, like it's 2 turns. Like it wouldn't take 2 turns, but like stuff like this. I think this is cool. I think it's fun tech. It's definitely like a YouTubeable mon. But I think it's just really one-dimensional. I really think it's one-dimensional. I think it's better than Lugia. Use Specs Kyurem B in Gen 5. I love Special Kyurem. I think it's really good. Dynamax, similar to how it helped out Zekrom, it was kind to Kyurem. Because you would use it on close sheet events, and then they would come in within Sins and intimidate it, and you would just Dynamax and just like chuck Earth Powers and get Max Quake Boost. It was really good. Definitely a mon that could do work on ladder. Yeah, I think it's a good ladder mon, right? We should really just change this to like usable very one-dimensional, saying like usable on closed sheet ladder. But it's funny. Yeah, it's just really hard to use an open sheet. So we're taking a look at Lunala. So Lunala is the first one we're going to take a look at from Gen 7. So remember, there's no Gen 6 restricteds here. We go right from the end of Gen 5 into Gen 7. And Lunala is actually a really, really good mon. So Lunala gets really, really good stat lines here. It gets the Shadow Shield ability, which is basically a super multi-scale. It can't be mold broken, so you always take half damage when you're at full, so basically like a built-in like super focus sash. Good speed, base 97, speed creeps. You're starting to see a pattern where like we're going to start to get out of control with this power creep. We speed creep all the other restricteds basically before this one. 113 is a bit wasteful in the attack stat, but like 137 is usable, 107 is great, 137 up here is really, really good. This thing's super chonky, and then Lunala gets like signature moves like Moongeist Beam. It also gets access to things like Expanding Force, which is a relatively newer move over the past like 3 or 4 years. Being able to pair with Entity, that's super, super nice. It gets access to like Trick Room. The problem with Lunala is that like it really has a 4 move slot syndrome. You can't run like all this stuff and the Meteor Beam with things like the Power Herb and stuff like that, and then still have room for like other tech moves. Like you'd love to be able to fit Wide Guard on this thing, and you'd love to be able to fit Wisp on it, and you'd really like to be able to fit things like Calm Mind. Lunala almost has too much tech. If we were to compare Lunala to something like a TCG term, it's a toolbox. It's similar to Mewtwo, and they can do a little bit of everything, and it has really, really good access to things like the Wide Guard here are very, very important. It even gets like Tailwind, Icy Wind, it gets Moonblast, like it's commonly built Fairy Terra or Water Terra. Very, very good mon. I think Lunala can do a little bit of everything. I'm going to put Lunala in the A tier. It's not S tier. And the reason it's not S tier is because it still shares other defensive typings, or similar weaknesses to things like Shadow Rider. Being 4 times weak to Ghost and Dark makes it not like busted, broken, because it doesn't have the speed to leverage. Lunala can fall prey to like a Sucker Punch if your team's not built correctly. So like Urshifu gives it problems. Both Urshifu forms give it problems. Shenpao gives it problems. Anything using Snarl gives Lunala like a lot of problems. Incineroar can really be a roadblock for Lunala if you don't have access to that Meteor Beam set. But I do think Lunala is better than Kyogre. It's the perfect partner for things like, you know, Miraidon and other like Tail Room-esque teams. It just is very good in this format. Terra has been very good to Lunala in this format. Feels like Lunala would be marginally better if we were still in close team sheet, given its versatility, this unpredictability. It might be, but at the same time, like, Lunala is just a really good mon. It always pops up. It always does well. There's never a format where Lunala has been, like, not usable, in my opinion. In which it's been, like, a usable mon. So Lunala is good. Now, if we were to take a look at Solgaleo gets a lot of the same tools as Lunala. It has a good ability in Full Metal Body, right? Being able to not be intimidated or stat dropped, but it's not as good as Shadow Shield. If you give Solgaleo Shadow Shield, that'd be kind of nuts. This guy gets a lot of the same tools. It gets the Trick Room. It gets the Wide Guard, right? Its signature move is going to be Sunsteel Strike, which basically breaks like abilities to let you hit like Ogerpon, Rock, and just blow through those sturdies and get the Oko. Same thing works against like multi-scale and stuff like that. It gets access to newer moves like Psychic Fangs, which is a secondary stab that can be used to break screens. I tend to build Solgaleos a lot with things like Earthquake and like, you know, Ground Terra and things like that. This is a really good check in close sheet to Miraidon. I think one of Solgaleo's problems is similar to Lunala. It has that 4 move slot syndrome where you want to run the support moves, but you kind of have to run the offensive options. It gets even things like Flare Blitz. You know, it gets access to like Flare Blitz. It gets Wild Charge. You tend to run it a little bit too aggressive, and 137 is usable. The fact that it can't be intimidated is nice. 97 is good, but Solgaleo ends up being like really, really one-dimensional in that like you have a bunch of single target moves, and all of your AoE is tied to things like Earthquake, which can hit your partner. And if you really want to KO anything with Earthquake, you have to waste your Terra. Or like Rock Slide. And if you really want to get those KOs, you have to have damage multipliers like Weakness Policy, Self-Proc it, or like pair it with like Helping Hands or Decorate from Alcremie. It's very, very like one-dimensional. But it is usable. I don't think it's in the B tier. I think it's going to go in the C tier somewhere, but it's definitely better than Ray. I think it's better than Reshiram too. We use a lot of Solgaleo. I don't think it's as good as Palkia, but it's similar to Palkia in that like they both want to run that like I'm probably going to Trick Room you at some point, but then like Solgaleo, it doesn't have as good a defensive typing as Palkia. But it has like more tech options than things like Reshiram. It has the Trick Room, it has the Wide Guard, it has things like that. I feel a lot of the things that Solgaleo does in this format that made it unique and good are done by Zenta. Basically, a big, bulky, like restricted that isn't afraid of being intimidated, that can trade 1-for-1 with things and Wide Guard if need be. That's not your boy Solgaleo, that's a Zamazenta. We're going to be talking about that one in a little bit. Let me know if you agree or disagree, but that's kind of just how I look at it. And then we have Dawnwing's Necrozma. These are both the Necrozma forms. They get the signature moves of things like the so let's take a look at the Dawnwings, because we're going to compare it to Lunala, right? So Dawnwings looks like this. It's a little bit slower than Lunala, but it has way more special attack, has a little bit less base HP, same attack stat, and then more Spadef. And again, it still gets access to that Moongeist Beam. I think Dawnwings is actually like a really usable mon. A very, very good mon with Terra. It still has that 4 times weakness to like Ghost and Dark, but at the same time, like Prism Armor is going to be able to cut some of the damage from super effective attacks. So if you go like into like a Fire Terra or like a Water Terra type that doesn't really have that many common weaknesses, you can really mitigate damage. This thing's built, if you want like an aggressive like Sweeper Lunala in Trick Room, this is the mon you use. It loses access to things like Wide Guard, but it just like, this is the set right here. Like, you go like super, super hard, and that's the set. It's like the Glue Eater Lunala. I think it's a very, very good mon. Definitely better than people give it credit for. There's always like one of these that pops up in day 2 usage, and no one really wants to fight it. So it's definitely in the B tier, but you need to be able to pair it with like the right restricted. It's better than Mewtwo, I would say, but I don't think it's better than Dialga. Again, it's too many common weaknesses to like random Sucker Punch. If you don't got the right terrain, it's going to ruin your day. Terrain control in general gives this guy a hard time, because if you pivot in that Rilla, right, they take away the Psychic Terrain, which means you have to go into like a Moongeist variant or something else. And then like, let's say you've already used your teammate to force their Terra. Like let's say, hypothetically, you lead with something with Snarl, and your opponent has to go Water Terra on their Dawnwings, and then you force that Terra, and on turn 2, you just pivot in Arilla, and now you can fake out the Dawn Wings, right? There's no more side terrain, and now it's susceptible to like Woodhammer and stuff like that. Those are situations in which like your Dawn Wings is too easily, influenced by what your opponent's doing. And you're not even wrong for like going through those terrors and doing those things. It's just like, I feel like Dawn Wings has a really low skill ceiling. It's built on like Psy spam, like Sunroom teams, and you can play your lines, but like it doesn't have all the tech that a lot of other things have. So while it has really good base stats, good abilities, good aggressive moves, it's one-dimensional, but it's just better. The power crept, like you can compare it to something like, the Palkia or like other things in this tier that just have been power crept into, the just good enough to function, but a much newer mon puts it in a higher tier. If we're taking a look at Dawn Wings, though, it's the Solgaleo variant. Or not Dawn Wings, Duskmane. I'm so sorry. Duskmane. I really like Duskmane. I use Duskmane a lot. The biggest problem with this thing is Prism Armor is a great defensive ability. And in previous gens, this Pokemon used to be a lot better in like Ultra Sun and Moon. When these guys, also, by the way, back in the day, these guys used to be able to just go into, you'd go with Necrozma or Duskmane, either one, and they could go into like, what is that freaking like Necrozma super variant? Freaking Ultra Necrozma with, look at those base stats, 167, physical or special 129. It got like a super Omega Z move. It had like crazy Neuro Force ability. This Pokemon was so cracked, and you didn't know if they were gonna go Trick Room with this or Trick Room with this or no Trick Room, and we're actually just going fast and blowing things up with the Ultra Necrozma. It was ridiculous. The ultimate 50-50 mon. But that being said, can't do that here. So this guy used to be really, really good at like Trick Room and stuff like that. It, again, loses access to the Wide Guard. It still gets the Sunsteel Strike. But this guy's like Ultimo one-dimensional. It doesn't really get AoE. It can go for like what? It can go for like Psychic. It can go for Photon Geyser. Both the Necrozma forms get Photon Geyser too. This is Necrozma's signature move. It does physical or special. So if I've been intimidated like 5 times, this now becomes a special attack, and that's okay. Or if I've been like Wisp or something, it becomes a special attack. Good stab moves, but like that's basically all it gets is like this. Good news. Oh no, it also gets Prismatic Laser Lamau. I think the difference between like these guys and a couple other things is that like you get to still run an item, and they have that 700 base stat, or sorry, 680 is good, but like I just don't really see them being like super viable. Hope Ultra Necrozma does not come back with the return of Megas. I know, right? Ultra Necrozma is cracked. Where would I put Duskmane? It's definitely down here somewhere. I think Lugia might be better than Duskmane, but I also think like Duskmane's like almost YouTube meme content. Because it gets like, it's one-dimensional, and it's just like a Trick Room bait thing. I almost want to say Duskmane's down here, but that feels so criminal. Like, Incineroar says Duskmane doesn't get to play the game. I'm gonna put it down here. The meta is not very friendly to this Pokemon. You can mitigate all the stuff you want in the world, but then like the way the meta works, like if we're talking about the mons that are going to be good near the end, things like Koraidon, Shadow Rider, Miraidon, things like that, they just check Duskmane so hard. Duskmane's definitely better than Zekrom and Giratina, but like I feel like the meta is more friendly to like Lugia's playstyle with like Calm Mind setup, and you can build that whole team on the Lugia. For if you were to try that with the Duskmane, it doesn't work. It can't like outvalue everything. You can get a Trick Room up, but there's so many other better ways to get Trick Room up. Hell, like Indidy's a better Pokemon than Duskmane in a lot of situations. And like we use a decent amount of Duskmane on YouTube. It's just like not great. And Solgaleo's better, and Zenta's better, and everything like that. So I think it's a D tier mon. Just my opinion. Duskmane was meant to be an upgraded Solgaleo, but Solgaleo is better, and like Zenta's better than both of them, right? So let's take a look at Zacian. I think Zacian, Zacian is the other mon in the game that probably has, Zacian and Zenta, the best stat allocation in the game. 148 base speed's going to let it outspeed all of like the Ruin and Paradox Pokemon. It is not speed crept by like Koraidon and Miraidon and stuff like that. 150 base attack. They've nerfed it in previous gens to make it so you only get the Intrepid Sword boost once. So you used to be able to just pivot out your Zacian over and over and over again, and it was like the ultimate like balance mon. Very good defensive typing, like Fairy Steel. Gets access to Behemoth Blade, which doesn't do double damage anymore. No additional effect, but it's 100% accuracy. It gets Player Up, which is not 100% accuracy. And then like you can build it with like Trailblaze, Swords Dance, Close Combat, Sacred Sword. Very solid mon. I think Zacian's very usable, and it's very like splashable onto a lot of different teams. Like if you just want aggression. Remember like how this tier says good, but needs an A or S tier partner. What that's really saying is like good, but needs an aggressive partner. It needs some way to actually close the game out, because these mons, they're putting so much work in like the defensive typing and their kits defensively that they can't really like close the games themselves. Zacian could be like, oh, you tailwind it for me, I'm gonna win. It's like, oh, you took away their weather for me, I'm gonna win. Oh, you like pin one of their mons or traded correctly with the mon, I'm gonna win, right? That's how it works, right? So I think Zacian's an A tier mon, but I don't think it's as good as Kyogre or Lunala. I think Zacian's in the A tier, and the reason why it's in the A tier and not like, it's not S tier at all. I've played with so much Zacian. Zacian loses to, it gets slowed down by Intimidate because you don't get the boost multiple times anymore. Fake Out gives it a lot of problems. Redirection is a killer. Like Ogerpon Rock just says, nope, Zacian's like can't really do anything in this matchup. Terra also is a big problem for Zacian because Zacian is so one-dimensional in its moveset. Like, oh, you have Kali I? I'm a Behemoth Blade that. It's like Water Terra. And like, you went all in on that. There is no like half game. You know, you have to make heavy read play with Zacian, and it's a high risk, high reward Pokemon. And I think Zacian and Kyogre are like a really good core. They go together very, very well. And that's because Kyogre, you really need to pair Zacian with like an AoE restricted to really get that value out of it. So it really makes the amount of mons you can pair it with a lot smaller. Things like Kyogre, Shadow Rider, in some situations Miraidon, in some situations Groudon. But you can't just pair like Zacian with like another single target restricted. Nice hat, where'd you get it? I got it at NAIC, where I almost used Zacian, because it's good. Taking a look at Zenta next. So Zenta used to be worse than Zacian, but it got a move called Body Press. And remember, it's the same, it's the physical, like, defensive variance of Zacian. It gets a +1 defense boost the first time it comes out in battle, and it boosts these stats. This is a great stat line. It's a little bit slower than Zacian, right? So it's not going to be outspeeding as many things, but like, look at the 140, 140, 92. That's massive. So the cool thing about Zenta, other than Zacian, is it can kind of be a flex add-in to like any sort of team at all. Very, very like solid mon. So like this move set right here with like either Heavy Slam or Behemoth Bash, which is its signature move, this just works on anything. You don't need to be, you can slap this Pokemon on any team and like potentially outvalue stuff. I really, really like this guy. Zenta's very, very solid. This is the best format Zenta's ever had. It's been waiting for years to be usable, and it really complements like this part of the meta. So I would put Zenta. Zenta is actually our very first S tier mon, because Zenta is so splashable, and it's so good at like not losing to the AoE mons while still like pinning a lot of like the good support Pokemon. Like Incineroar, I don't care about your Intimidate, and I can just Body Press. You have to Terra, and you have to do other things. You have to react to me doing something with my support mon. My support mon is a really good closer, and it doesn't have a lot of the same weaknesses. Like Fighting Steel is a usable enough defensive typing. It's a really, really good mon. Like, you can pair Zenta with any of these or any of these, and like that's a team that will get points at an event. That's just how good this mon is. You can even go like Iron Defense sets too, or Snarl. There's so many like really cool things Zenta can do. It's the perfect like support S tier restricted mon for this format, for how Terra works. You don't have to expend a lot of resources to use Zenta, and if you want to use Save Your Terra for your Zenta, it's like an automatic checkmate piece against a lot of really good teams. So Zenta's our first S tier mon, and we're taking a look at the last mon, the last mon of Sword and Shield before DLC, which is Eternatus. So we talked a little bit about Eternatus before. It's similar to Giratina in that it gets pressure, right? But it's like a mixture of like Giratina and Lunala, and that like it gets pressure, right, as its only ability, but it's a lot more aggressive. 145, 130, 140. So it's similar. It's that Lunala like bloated HP stat. Same thing with Giratina. That bloated HP stat off decent defenses with like high special attack, and then gets access to Meteor Beam, right? The thing holding Eternatus back is that it doesn't get access to like the, you know, Wide Garden Trick Room that Lunala gets, right? So it's not like a Lunala in that regard, and it's not like Giratina either, because Giratina doesn't get access to Recover. So if you're at a road where you want to build a Giratina, but you want it to be bulkier and have that, you know, like stall value, you'd use an Eternatus. And if you want it like a Lunala with like more aggression and recovery options, you could run this instead of Lunala. That being said, it's similar to those. It's like a jack of some trades, master of really none, because it's just only really good at stalling. It gets Cosmic Power and a bunch of other things like that. It's a good recipient of Terra. You're always going to see like one Eternatus like get points at an event, I think. But this is a really good example of it is one-dimensional. And like just throwing an Eternatus next to Shadow Rider doesn't make it good. Throwing it next to Miraidon doesn't make it good. So it's in here somewhere. I think that Solgaleo is better than Lunala. Or sorry, not Lunala. Solgaleo is better than Eternatus. It's hard to say. It's definitely better than Reshiram and all these guys. But I think it's one of those mons that, like, you have to basically play stall to play this thing. And if you're running it with, like, Meteor Beam and all those other things like that, that's basically a Lunala. That's not an Eternatus. You're not really doing what it needs to be doing. It's just that, like, its playstyle is not one that's very optimal in Reg I. Things like Shadow Rider give it a lot of problems. Miraidon and the kit that comes with Miraidon with like Iron Hands and Friggrath also give it a lot of problems. Psy Spam is still definitely a thing, so you gotta be respectful of that as well. It's okay. It's an okay mon. Right? Love Scarf with it. Again, I think that like those sort of sets only really work on like close sheet ladder. I like Scarf Eternatus as well because it really doesn't need like that much speed investment to really use Scarf. Like this is the same speed as like a Scarf Ursh, right? So it's like you could just max this out and then put like stats, like you can max your stats out like something like this and like run a Scarf set. And that's like definitely like viable, you know? Something like that would just work, right? You'd have extra points somewhere, I guess, but like it's fine. I think it's a cool mon. It's just there's not really a reason to run it over other things like Lunala, in my opinion. Let's take a look at the riders now. We're finally going to be taking a look at the riders. We have Ice Rider and Shadow Rider, and they get a couple cool things here. So this is where like power creep gets out of control with these two Pokemon. These two Pokemon are pay to win. You cannot get these Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. You have to get Calyrex, which is a fused Pokemon from Sword and Shield, trade it over, and then you can catch Glastrier or Spectrier in Scarlet and Violet. But you cannot get this Pokemon without buying a complete other game and its DLC. These are pay to win, and they're worth it. It gets 165 attack, 50 base speed. This one's made with Trick Room. Like, this thing has been on so many different teams. This is the standard set for it. There's two basic ways to play it. You can build it like this, which is how most people have played it for years, or you can put like leftovers on it and run it with Leech Seed. And both are viable, really, depending on what you want to do. This one plays a little bit longer game. This one, like, I think one of the European regionals, and this is how people are kind of playing it now with like something like a Water Terra. Very, very solid. Like, it's a good mon. I think it's fine. Really, really solid. Shadow Rider, on the other hand, is a lot more aggressive. It's like a glass cannon. You can build this thing with like Sash or Orb, and then it gets access to like 150 base speed faster than pretty much everything, 165 special attack. And again, the thing that sets these guys apart from like other AoE mons, because like this Glacial Lance and this Astral Barrage, they're going to be AoE moves to hit both with 100% accuracy and have 120 base damage, 120 base power. Very, very solid. Shadow Rider can come pre-built with like things like, you know, it can even get like Expanding Force if you want to be more aggressive. It can get like access to like Pollen Puff. These guys also get like a ton of support moves. They get access to like Disable, Encore, Protect, Haze, Heal Pulse, Life Dew. They get everything. They literally get everything. These mons are just absolutely pay to win. So that being said, where do they go? Right? Everyone knows that they're going to be good. But Terra's also been a mechanic that's very, very friendly to these guys. Because before, when you ran Shadow Rider in like Sword and Shield or other formats, yeah, a Sucker Punch, well-timed Sucker Punch, pins it. All you got to do is tech a Sucker Punch and you're good into Shadow Rider. Now they can just be like, I'm going to go Fairy Terror. Not only do I not die to your Sucker Punch, I resist it. And then I KO you back. And I get an As-1 boost, which is another thing we're not even talking about. This thing's ability, both their abilities are a fusion of Unnerve and basically Beast Boost into their highest stat. Every single time they get a KO, they get a +1 to their attack or special attack. So where would we put them? They're both in the S tier. But it's hard to say where they go. I think Ice Rider is better than Zenta. I do, and it's only because it gets Trick Room. Ice Rider in itself is its own win condition, can 1v4, flip a whole game. You pair Ice Rider with any other restricted, and Ice Rider will always command more respect because it threatens to Trick Room and then win the game by itself. That is ridiculous. It's always going to soak those fake outs. People are going to over-respect your Ice Rider in every single situation. They're going to spam those wide guards. They're going to do everything in their power to not lose Ice Rider because it's so easy to play. And it threatens so much. Shadow Rider, where do I think it is? I think Shadow Rider is actually here. And Shadow Rider is obviously stronger than both these. You can just throw a Spec Shadow Rider and beat anyone on any team with an unlimited amount of damage. But I think it's more one-dimensional than things like Zenta and Ice Rider. Because, like, it is a little bit of a Terra Hog. It can be pinned by Sucker Punch. Wide Guard gives it a big problem. Shadow Rider mirrors are dicey, being able to just like speed tie each other and have super effective moves that Oko each other back. Shadow Rider is very good, but it's one of those mons that, like, if we're talking about making a tier list for the World Championships, I feel like all the really good players are going to have their Shadow Rider matchups covered the best that they can. They're going to create their terrors, they're going to have those normal terrors, they're going to have like wide guards where they need them, and they're not really going to let their opponent just win the game in 2 turns with Shadow Rider. They're going to do everything in their power to not let that happen. And yeah, I think that it's still an S tier mon, and you compare Shadow Rider with any of like these mons, like maybe like any of these mons, maybe not Mewtwo, right? And it makes them good, right? Shadow Rider Ho-Oh, usable. Shadow Rider Groudon, definitely usable. Shadow Rider Dawnwings, if you got the right size spam core, you got the right size spam core. You know, it definitely like enables these mons that have like the really reactive and defensive playstyles. Shadow Rider Kyurem, that's a team that I almost took to NAIC, right? One of my buddies did. It works. Shadow Rider Kyogre, Zacian, yeah, sign me up. That's exactly what Zacian needs to actually like succeed, is that good, fast AoE teammate. So I think that these mons are great here. And we're moving on to Scarlet and Violet. We have Koraidon, Miraidon, and Terapagos. So let's take a look at both Koraidon and Miraidon here, because they're very similar. They're foils of each other, basically. So the things that these guys get are their abilities. Orichalcum Pulse we already looked at. It sets the sun and gives you a damage multiplier. Miraidon sets Electric Terrain, which is in Scarlet and Violet a 1.3 boost, and then gives you additional 1.3. Imagine if this was in like Sun and Moon back when terrains were all 1.5. That's nuts. So setting the sun and getting a 1.5 on your fire moves, which you don't stab, and then getting 1.3 is good. So we see most people play this guy with like a Fire Terra. And then this guy can be built with like Life Orb. It can be built with like a Covert Cloak. Like there's a bunch of, not Covert Cloak, I mean it can be Covert Cloak, but like it's Clear Amulet, sorry. To make it so like you don't really lose to Sin. And then their signature moves are going to be things like Collision Course, which is going to be a base 100-100 and deals an additional 1.3 if it's super effective. Miraidon's is going to be Electro Drift. Now, the thing that sets Miraidon apart from Koraidon, because these guys are both single target attackers. Their signature moves are single target. Their big damage moves like Draco, Flare Blitz, Dragon Claw, those are all single target. Miraidon, for some reason, gets Dazzling Gleam, which like I don't know why they gave this mon this move, but like people flip on the Fairy Terra. I have a feeling if they ever put Miraidon in another game, they will take Dazzling Gleam from it, because I don't think this mon was intended to be a Xerneas. Like, what people basically do is they turn this thing into a Xerneas. They use the 1.3 boost from the Hadron engine, they slap a Specs on it, and they just full send out Dazzling Gleam. And I do not think this mon was intended to be a Xerneas when it was created. I don't know why it gets Dazzling Gleam. Maybe it's just there so it has better matchup into Koraidon in some matchups, but like I don't think this was intended to be its playstyle. It gets also, unlike Koraidon, Volt Switch is just better than U-Turn in some situations because it just does more damage and has synergy with like the terrain and its stab, versus Koraidon gets something like a U-Turn if you wanted to build a set like that. It's not as good. You can blow things up with Volt Switch. So like this sort of set right here with like a Draco is really good. But Miraidon also gets access to like Parabolic Charge, Calm Mind, Dragon Pulse. It gets everything. It literally does get everything. It gets Mirror Coat, Screens, Snarl is in a really good set on it. It gets Taunt for some reason, right? Miraidon is the best Pokemon in the game. It is the best Pokemon. It is the best recipient of this generation's mechanic Terra. It has the most damage with the most abusable speed tier, and it enables all of the right Pokemon being able to activate the Quark Drive on all the different, Violet Paradox Pokemon. Miraidon is definitely the top of the list, and there's a reason why you see teams like Miraidon Ice Rider do really well, and Miraidon Zenta's doing really well, and Miraidon Shadow Rider has done really well, and Miraidon Lunala has done really well, and we haven't really seen that much Miraidon Kyogre, but I think that was Gavin's other restricted, was Miraidon. And then like Miraidon Zacian is still good too, because all the things that go well with that, like Whimsicott, it works really well with both those. That's its Tailwind setter. And Farigiraf goes really well with that, right? So literally, Miraidon can go with anything and make that team competitive. Same thing, Miraidon Ho-Oh, that was on like 2 of the top cut teams in Milwaukee. Miraidon Groudon, you can go for Discharge P-Blades. Miraidon Kyurem White, there might be something there. But like Miraidon Dialga, that's the same as Miraidon Lunala. Miraidon Dawnwing, same thing. Miraidon Mewtwo, I made a team with Miraidon Mewtwo, and it was a really like fun, creative way to do that, right? Miraidon's just really good. Where would I put Koraidon though? Koraidon is a bit of a Terra Hog. It has a 4x weakness to Fairy, weaknesses to Ice, weaknesses to Flying. It's abusable by Intimidate, and if you turn the weather off of Koraidon, which is more common than turning off terrain, I would say, Koraidon's a wet noodle. Right? I think Koraidon in most situations is bait, but it's still really good. It's not in the B tier, it's in the A tier. I think it's probably worse than Kyogre, though. I think it's better than Zacian because it in itself enables better teammates, and it's similar to Zacian. They're both those big, fast, single-target attackers that do really, really good one-on-one damage. But Zacian doesn't enable stuff like Flutter Mane, Chi-Yu, other photosynthesis mons, chlorophyll mons. Zacian's not a playstyle. Zacian's like something you slap on at the end to close out a game. Koraidon, just like you lead the Koraidon, like Koraidon Weezing's one of the best teams in the core right now. In the meta right now, because you put an ability shield on the Koraidon. Weezing stops every single ability, which means you still get your stun on your Koraidon, which means you still get the 1.3 boost from your Orichalcum Pulse, and you can just start doing like massive damage. So like, I think that like Koraidon in itself is like a playstyle. It's an engine that you can use to make your whole team work. And that's why it's just a little bit better than Zacian. But I don't think that it's better than Kyogre. I think that's probably, this is going to be one of the weird parts of the tier list that I think people will disagree with. They're probably going to put Koraidon here. They might even put it up here. They might put it right here. But I like Kyogre more. I think Kyogre's in the threat that Kyogre has with the automatic like I win button if you don't have the right team. Because you may say, Koraidon's better than Kyogre because Koraidon can turn the weather off. But like, Kyogre Torn checks Koraidon, you know? So, you know, there's two sides to each stone there. But yeah, I think that that's probably where I would put it. And we're taking a look at the last mon on this list that's a real mon is going to be Terapagos. Now, Terapagos is the DLC mon from Area 0, and it can go into like a Terra-like version. It starts off like this. There's a few different versions of Terapagos. And basically, when you send out Terapagos, it has this ability right here, which is Terra Shell. Basically, multi-scale when you're full. And this is its stats. 85, 110, 105. It's very, very weak. It gets usually they're like to be ran with leftovers, and you kind of play a little bit of a stall game while you're going for like Protect and Calm Minds to start enabling you to use a move called Terra Starstorm. Now this is, you only get 8 of it, which is like the thing about this move. It's a normal move, and when you're terastallized, it's an AoE move that becomes typeless, which means it's neutral or better against everything. And if your opponent is using a Terra Pokemon, it deals double damage. And when you're dealing that double damage, you're not using this stat line, you're using this one. 130. You still get the same base speed, but you gain a bunch more HP. I actually use Terapagos at NAIC. I think Terapagos is one of those mons that we have not even started to really hit the skill ceiling, because like Terapagos, like, there's no reason to really use Terapagos, because, like, you can use all these guys, but at the same time, like, Terapagos can turn off the Miraidon's terrain. It can wall the Ice Rider. It has a terrible matchup into Zenta. It can do good damage against Kali, right? That's fair. But Zenta gives it a really hard time. I think Terapagos is a usable mon. I do not think that we've like really figured out as a community, like there is some way to use Terapagos to make like an almost unwinnable situation for your opponents. People like to pair it with a lot of like Encore Disable users like Screamtail and fish for like a really long game where you play like Calm Mind and go for like a really stall Terapagos game. That's a really solid way to do it. And we've seen a lot of Specs Pagos do well. Meteor Beam Pagos is good. I used like Rock Polish Pagos when I played it at NAIC. But yeah, I think that Pagos is good. I think it's a B tier mon though. It needs the right partner. I don't think it's just solid. I think it needs a lot of babysitting. It's better than Mewtwo, it's better than Domwings, it's better than Dialga, it's better than Kyurem. It's not better than Groudon. It's not better than Ho-Oh. It needs too much babysitting. These guys can function on their own, but if you pair the right thing with Pagos, it's very good. I don't think Pagos is a boo. I think Pagos is a good mon. No one really likes to play Pagos, I don't think. And the fact that it's, like, usable into Miraidon, it's usable into all these. Like, every one of these guys, like, you know, Koraidon and Zacian can give it problems, but, like, those guys fall prey to the things you pair with Terapagos in a lot of situations. So, like, I think that's pretty good. I think Terapagos is definitely, like, a usable mon in those situations. And I think this list looks really, really good. There's not that many mons that aren't really usable. Basically just being, like, these two, and I just don't feel like Duskmane should be in the C tier. The last few mons we have are things like these guys. We were using Cosma M in YouTube recently, but it's not like a YouTube mon. It's definitely bad. Base Form Calyrex is not going to be good. Base Form Necrozma, we've used it, right? But it's not that great. Tier list would probably look something like this, because this thing still gets like Meteor Beam. It still is usable. We used Base Form Necrozma about a month. Was it even a month ago? When did I use Base Form Necrozma on YouTube? We use Wheezing Solgaleo there. When did I use that? They're right here. It was about a month ago. I used like base form Necrozma. It's not that great. You can definitely try and make it work. It gets Meteor Beam's probably its best set. Meteor Beam, Expanding Force, stuff like that. Base form Zacian and Zamazenta are a little bit different. So we'll talk about those guys. And that's going to be right here. Differences is they still keep the same abilities, right? But their base stats are very different. Zacian becomes just a Soul Fairy type. It doesn't get Behemoth Blade anymore. And then you keep the same base defenses. You lose a little bit of attack and a little bit of speed, but you're able to use an item on something like the Zacian. So you could throw like a Sash on there, and this is not bad. I think you can throw Scope Lens on them is what I usually like to do, and build them on like a Dragon Terra set with like a teammate that uses Dragon Shear to make all their moves auto crit. So that's kind of what these guys do. I think Sash might be better on Zacian though, and then the Zenta basically is the same sort of set, but it gets access to like the Wide Guard and stuff like that. So like Zamazenta is the same variant. You actually get faster on Zamazenta than you do, so you get faster. The Zacian made day 2 is AV, yeah, AV Zacian, like that's nuts, right? You lose a lot of your bulk here, but like you get a little bit faster on the Zenta. I think they're definitely usable, right? You think base Zenta is good? Probably something like YouTube Beam content, but Seeds Zenta seems solid. Yeah, you can go Seeds here is what most people like to do. So you get like a double defense boost if you pair it with like a Miraidon. And so that's, again, that's a sign of like every good team should have at least one of like Miraidon really enabling something else. They're definitely YouTubeable. I think base form Zenta is better than Zekrom and Giratina, and I think that like base form Zacian is probably better than Giratina, but I don't think it's better than Zekrom. I think Zekrom still has a little bit more gas in the tank. So that is my list. Do you guys agree or disagree? I did my very best to rank these mons for their own, in between their own tier, and yeah, I think this is a solid list. You know, obviously base form Kyurem and Necrozma aren't that usable, but this is where I would put it. This is the type of things I expect to do well at Worlds. You're going to see a bunch of combinations of these 8 Pokemon with like every once in a while, one of these will be sprinkled in. Probably one of like these 2 will be sprinkled in. I don't think we're going to see a lot of Palkia. I don't think we're going to see a lot of like Dialga or Giratina. You might see like a Groudon, a Ho-Oh, or like a Domwing sprinkled in. You'd probably move Terapagos up 1 and Zacian down 1, but it looks good. You think Zacian's a B tier mon? I think Zacian's definitely like an A tier mon. Because it forces like a lot of respect. I think Zacian forces, as someone who played with like a lot of Zacian leading up to NAIC, I think Zacian forces very specific leads from like everyone. It's easier to influence their team previous Zacian. It's one of the values of the mon. Top 3 looks right. Sadamista takes on Koraidon. That's my boy. Could you say really quick what you think his best partner is? Well, that's the thing. Like, I think with Koraidon, it's one of those things where Koraidon can go so well with everything, is its own like engine, being able to enable things. It's really good with like obviously Wheezing and stuff like that, or Flutter or anything like that. It's just that I don't think that Koraidon is as good as Ogre, and I don't think it's I think it's more too one-dimensional to be compared to Lunala, right? I think all of these mons are like cracked. These are the 8 mons that are really, really good. The reason I moved Zacian down 1 is because it's being so popular. That's like the thing. I see that as a feature, being like, if you have the right teammate, if you know they have to lead in Sin or bring in Sin to check your Zacian, and you have your team that punishes in Sin massively, that's a W. That's like a wasted slot from them. But that's me. That's like, maybe I'm like Zacian pilled, which is definitely, you know, possible. Zacian is like super cracked in that regard. I don't think it's B tier at all. I mean, if there was like an A- tier, we could put Zacian in that. I think that would be fair. Because there are obvious problems with Zacians too. But the fact that Zacian's still like... Zacian has super effective here. You can check here with Sacred Sword. It's bad into Shadow Rider. But it's not terrible into Shadow Rider. You soak that 1 Astral, right? So it's like in those situations, Zacian can kind of keep up and not be power crept out by like the S tier mons. And then it massively punishes a lot of things like Lunala and stuff like that to go Fairy Terra. So I feel like Zacian's very unique, but I think it's very, very usable. But that's my list. And yeah, it's fun to make tier lists every once in a while. I don't think people make tier lists past like the first month of a new format. So going back and revisiting the tier list at like the end of the format, I think is really, really cool. People are still going to hate that I put Mewtwo in B tier, but I think it's still true. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the tier list here.